The Formula One season may be over, but Grid Talk is anything but, as we bring you our picks for the best drivers of the 2020 Formula One season. Welcome back to the Grid Talk podcast, everybody. Hosting today will be me, George Howson, and joining me are sports journalist Louis Edwards.
Hello.
Journalist Ruby Price.
Hello.
And co-host of the Monkeyseat Podcast, Tom Horrox.
Hi there.
Well, welcome everybody, and thank you as well for getting your votes in. We've done a similar thing to what we did last season. We just got all the hosts together, virtually of course, and got everybody's picks for who they think is the best 10 drivers of the last season, because there's been some incredible performances up and down the grid. There really has, and some things we've pretty much agreed on and some things we've kind of differed on, and some people like Tom's co-host Carl has gone for some very strange order, but everybody's got an opinion. So without further ado, we'll get on to number 10, and we've gone for Valtteri Bottas. And Ruby, you were the highest placed person for this. You went for, I think, 5th for Bottas overall. Normally he was around 9th or 10th for people. So I just kind of explain that, because I think by most people's accounts he's had a very poor season. Some people questioning whether he'd even be at Mercedes next year, if George Russell would replace him. But you went for 5th overall.
I mean, I just couldn't really find it in my heart to put him lower, saying he finished 2nd in the championship. You know, as you say, hasn't been on top form at all this season. You know, he did put in some good qualifying performances to keep Lewis on his feet, but really the only times that he finished ahead of Lewis was when Lewis then dropped back because he wasn't performing. But yeah, as you say, just it hasn't been the best season for Valtteri. A lot of people would argue that maybe there are other drivers who deserve that seat a bit more, who may also put in some better performances. But, you know, Mercedes has stuck with Bottas for the last couple of years. I don't think they're going to stop that until he stops doing what he was, he was hired to finish 2nd unless Lewis wasn't performing. Unless he stops doing that, I don't think they're going to, stop that kind of dynamic in the team. This season, I think the thing we're going to remember him most for is spinning more times in a Beyblade in Turkey.
That is a millennial reference there. If you don't know what that is, kids, look it up. It was a hell of a show back in the day. Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I get that. I think the thing for me is that this season we've had a lot of drivers who genuinely outperformed the car on a regular, and Bottas hasn't done that. So it didn't make my top 10 personally. But a guy that definitely outperformed his car, Tom, the guy we've gone for 9th overall, George Russell. Now, obviously, he got his chance in the Mercedes as well, so he proved that not only does he outdrive the Williams, he also performs very well in that Mercedes too.
Yeah, he proved me wrong, definitely. I was saying sort of around Imola time that he's a little bit unproven with his racecraft, especially spinning under the safety car, and obviously his biggest mistake of his career. There was other times he was having a battle with Lando Norris and Alex Albon. I think maybe it was Russia. It was certainly a street track, but yeah, that kind of ended in tears for him, outbraking himself and flat spotting his tyres and ruining his own race. So I was a little bit unconvinced on that. Obviously, he's always had a lot of speed through qualifying, through all formulas, and he seemed like he did have the race pace through the lower formulas as well, certainly in a good car. But the only question mark for me remains about whether he can wrestle a car to a better position than it's able to do. I mean, obviously, he's outperforming that Williams, but we just don't know how good Latifi is. I would love to see him in a mid-grid car. And also, yes, Sakir was incredibly impressive. I was surprised at how well he did. I thought Bottas was going to beat him there. But I would love to see how he would do against Bottas when he hasn't got 3 days of Hamilton data to work from over 2/3 of the track, because that, for me, would have been a massive head start for him. He just had to hone Hamilton's setup to him and adjust a little bit of squiggly bit in the middle that Sakir has. So he had a really great starting point. So if he'd have been in Abu Dhabi, I think Bottas probably would have comprehensively outdone him. And also Bottas just had a bad day at the worst possible time in Sakir. But yeah, overall, he's, long story short, he absolutely bossed that Williams to a better position than it seemingly was capable of doing. So yeah, proved me wrong. So definitely deserves a place in the top 10, possibly even slightly higher. But I can't remember where I put him, to be honest. But yeah, good season overall.
I think you put him fairly high. I think you went for him for 6th place overall, which is fair enough. He's such a hard one to judge though, because Louis, he's in he's in the worst car in the grid most of the season round. And then when he did get in a good car, like you say, Tom, that's a good point. He did have lots of data from Hamilton, but so did Bottas as well. Bottas had 3 days of running before that as well. So he's a hard one to judge, is George Russell. But one thing's for sure, he definitely deserves a shot in a better car. But unfortunately, it's looking like he'll have to wait until at least 2022 for that.
Yeah, I agree sort of a lot with what Tom said. You know, I've been fairly unconvinced with George's race pace this season. You know, often he would just randomly find himself behind Latifi. It was like, after having such an amazing qualifying, it was kind of puzzling why he would sort of end up in those positions. But you know, I think he came into that sort of Sakhir Grand Prix. It's like, this is my time to prove why I'm here, and he did a good job of it. And yeah, you're right. It's so difficult to put your finger on sort of like where George Russell sort of stands amongst the drivers. Like, we know he has raw pace, but he does need that opportunity in a better car to actually properly show. Because when you're in a car that is stone dead last, and it's always going to be pretty much stone dead last, it makes it really tricky. So yeah, hopefully he does get a better drive in 2022. But you know, this season we're probably going to get a better representation of where Latifi is. We'll then get a better idea of how quick George is. If, you know, Williams are able to, say, catch the likes of the Haas and the Alfa Romeo, you'd like to see him convincingly beat them two teams over the course of the majority of the season.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, it depends how they develop in the winter. I mean, they've still got the Mercedes engine, which is good, but the car itself isn't great. Then again, it did improve a lot from the previous year. I mean, yeah, it wasn't very good in 2019, obviously. That was a terrible car, but they have improved a lot. So hopefully he'll be able to get his first points for Williams next year. He did get his first Formula One points. I mean, my God, he had it hard in Sakhir. He really deserved to win that race, but F1 is cruel at times. It really is. Speaking of wins, though, a guy that did manage to win in a midfield car this year, Ruby, our 8th place man, Pierre Gasly. And after being demoted from Red Bull down to Toro Rosso, which is now Alpha Tauri, you kind of saw his career maybe going a similar way to Daniel Kvyat. But ever since he's gone back to Toro Rosso / Alpha Tauri, he has been doing some incredible performances. And that win in Monza was fully deserved. He was just something else. One of the biggest surprises in recent times in winning that race. Yeah,
there was just a whole feeling of just utter shock and awe when Gasly, crossed that finish line. It was kind of helped that Lewis Hamilton didn't notice a safety car sign. Otherwise, it probably would have been a very different story. However, fighting against Carlos Sainz, for what felt like the longest amount of time ever in Monza, that was a very good performance from Gasly. He showed that he's not the driver he was at Red Bull. We even saw glimpses of that towards the latter end of the season after being dropped from Red Bull last season, and then finishing on the podium in Brazil, and then just carrying that momentum this season to constantly outperform the AlphaTauri, which is a midfield car. He was pretty much there or thereabouts for most of the season, but there was also a little bit of inconsistency, which is why he's probably not as high up as some people would have put him on this list. But he did finish 10th in the end in an AlphaTauri. That's a performance, and that Eau Rouge overtake as well. That was a standout memory this season.
Yeah, it was incredible at times. It really was. Yeah, not as consistent as you might like him to be. That's partly down to the car, maybe. I mean, a telling thing for him is it wasn't just that win. I mean, he had several top 5, top 6 finishes when that car had no business being up there. You compare him to Kvyat, he's got well over double Kvyat's points, 75 to 32. So a big difference there. I mean, I do feel for Gasly as well, though, Tom. I mean, a bit like Russell, he's kind of stuck in the AlphaTauri. It's a decent car, but it's not maybe a car that's good enough for him. It's kind of hard to see where he'll go. He's sticking with AlphaTauri next year, but it's kind of like, where does he go? I don't think he's ever going to get promoted back to Red Bull.
No, as the talk obviously is that he may end up in that Renault seat, which I thought was a very strong possibility. But with Ocon's improvement, in the second half of the season. I think that it all depends on how Ocon does against Alonso next year. But yeah, it is difficult to see where he's going to go. He's never going to get back in that Red Bull. I think the rumor was that he made some comments to Adrian Newey about what have you done to the second car to make it so difficult to drive. Like, kind of making out that it was different for him as it was for Verstappen, and that just rubbed up Newey the wrong way, and as a result, they won't ever have him back. Because I think there were comments from Christian about he needs to look at himself as to why he was dropped in the first place as opposed to his performances. But yeah, I mean his performance absolutely first half of the season was great. Lacked a little bit of consistency, took advantage of a slow start. But I want to get this in. That was Carlos Sainz's race to win, the Monza. If it weren't for the glory hunting Alphas putting themselves in the way of Sainz, and Sainz had to dump all of his ERS energy to get ahead of them, which is why it took him so long to get up to the back of Gasly. That was Sainz's race to win. So as a diehard McLaren fan, I'm still angry at him for that, but can't begrudge him. He definitely took advantage of it when he was in that position. But how many other people could have done that realistically, being in that position? So that's my only caveat to that. But yeah, definitely reinvented himself, proved that he deserves to be in Formula One, and I do hope that if he doesn't remain with AlphaTauri beyond next season, that he does get picked up by another team, and that team is competitive.
Yeah, I'll echo all of that. I mean, I was going to say that no prizes for guessing that Tom is a diehard McLaren fan, even if you're not looking at the video. He's not bitter at all. He's not bitter at all about that.
Not even a little bit.
Would have been the first win for 8 years for McLaren, that. But yeah. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, Pierre Gasly, a very worthy 8th. I mean, some may say potentially higher, but yeah, he's definitely done great this year and is fully deserving of that spot. 7th place is one of the McLaren drivers, Louis, Lando Norris. Last lap, Lando. And, 2019, he had a very solid debut year. And 2020, he just built on that and really challenged Carlos Sainz in the championship. He only just lost out to him in the end, but he was a lot closer this year, which shows real progress on his side.
Yeah, I think you could say it's an overall better year for Lando. He definitely sort of shook off some of those sort of debut sort of season nerves and really started to, dig his heels in a bit and really show the pace that he has. I think that was evident by the stunning last couple of laps in Austria and then the last lap in Styria, which were just both incredible, just to watch and see him, really show what he's worth. But yeah, it's not been the smoothest of seasons for Lando. There's been definitely times where his race pace especially has frustrated me at times. Like you've seen Carlos just sort of do what he does and do great things, and Lando's sort of just struggling a little bit. But then, of course, there's also been times where Lando has raced absolutely superbly. I think if it wasn't for his engine issues in the Nürburgring, I think a podium's definitely possible. His pace was looking quite strong, so it would have been nice to see him, on another podium. He can only take this momentum, into next season. He's got Daniel as a teammate. Daniel's not going to be no slouch, and he's gonna really have to take the fight to Daniel. With the Mercedes engine in the back of that McLaren next season, one can only wonder what's going to happen.
Yeah, things definitely looking good for McLaren. They got third in the Constructors' Championship this year, and like you said, Mercedes engines in the back of the car for next year. It can only be a good thing for them, but they will face a lot of competition from the likes of recovering Ferrari. Alpine are going to do well as well, and who knows what Aston Martin are going to do as well. Now they've got Vettel. But yeah, I mean, yeah, Louis was right. His race pace sometimes did frustrate us, did Lando Norris, but it's very easy to forget. He's only 21 years old. He was 20 years old at the start of this season. He's so young, and he's doing really well. He's there on absolute merit. He even got his first podium this year as well, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really scary to think that F1 drivers are younger than me now, having had them being older than me for most of my time being involved in Formula One fandom. But yeah, I mean, you've got to remember as well, the consistency that Lando showed this season as well helped McLaren to achieve that third place in the championship. If you look at the difference between the positions last season, Sainz and Norris were very much further apart in terms of, points that they achieved over the season. And I think the consistency that both drivers have shown basically allowed them to, then take that third place against two very good and very well performing teams this season.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And yeah, it is scary knowing that Formula One drivers are younger than you. You've got it coming, Louis. Don't worry. It'll happen in a few years' time.
Happened a long time ago for me.
It's happening next season. It's happening.
Oh,
Well,
is Tsunoda younger than you?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, God.
Born
Oh.
after the year 2000.
It's mental, isn't it? It did make me laugh this year. My girlfriend, Alana, she got into racing for the first time this year, and she watched some F2 with me, and she saw Tsunoda's picture show up on the F2, and she was just like, "Did they let 12-year-olds race?" And I didn't know they could start them that young.
He's actually older than me, so I'm still good for next season.
God.
Making me feel old now.
21st century boy, honestly. God. Oh man, so someone not quite as young as Lando Norris, but someone who has definitely got a lot of vigor about him. Daniel Ricciardo, Tom, our pick for 6th overall, his teammate for next year. Only just lost out to our 5th place man in the point standings here. But yeah, a fantastic year for him. Renault's first podium since 2011, if you count them as fully Renault, 2010 if you don't. Really good for him. And I think he got 5th overall in the World Championship too. So amazing year for Ricciardo as he departs Renault.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Renault looked really strong at the start of the season, but then I think Mercedes just seemed to get it together right at the flag and started a lot stronger than people expected. Renault were my pick at the start of the season before a wheel had been turned to be 3rd place in the championship. And that was before we knew how bad Ferrari were. So I was a bit disappointed in how Renault were doing. But yeah, he consistently put that car exactly where it deserved to be, whereas Ocon perhaps didn't. A bit of a slow return to the sport for him. And then finally, as you say, getting those 2 podiums in 3 races in the second half of the season, back to where he was. I don't think he ever lost anything. I think the car just didn't give him what he needed. Going to McLaren, obviously very happy about that because he's always been one of my favourite drivers. So him getting into a McLaren is going to be buzzing. And yeah, he kept his teammate at arm's length for pretty much the whole season, but that arm was getting shorter and shorter as the season went on, and right at the end there, Ocon was pretty much on a par with him. So it's going to be interesting to see how that relationship between Ocon and Alonso pans out next year. But yeah, Ricciardo did everything he needed to do and more, so fully deserves his position in the top 10.
Yeah, brilliant. And, like a lot of drivers in this, he outperformed his car at times, and he really outperformed his teammate as well. Again, another driver who pretty much got double the points of his teammate. Very impressive for Daniel Ricciardo. And Louis, this is the thing about him, he might not be in a top car anymore, but he's still producing incredible performance. He's still getting best of the rest. And Ferrari being bad this season, like Tom mentioned, really opened the door for Ricciardo to get multiple podiums.
Yeah, it's weird to think that Ricciardo stepped on the podium twice this season.
Forgot the shoe the first time, though.
Yeah, just had to get another to be safe. No, it's been an excellent season for Daniel. He has been really good, and he's completely outperformed his teammate for quite a lot of the season. And even when the Renault didn't look competitive, you could always rely on Ricciardo to perform. That midfield battle throughout this season has been so crazy. It's been so hectic. You never knew going into one weekend to the next who would be on top. Would it be McLaren? Would it be Racing Point? Would it be Renault? But you could always count on Ricciardo to do a good job, get as many points as possible, and that at the end of the day helped him get 5th place in the constructors, which is an absolutely incredible achievement.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, he really did carry Renault. If Ocon was on the same level as him at the start of the season, Renault would have been really challenging McLaren for 3rd place in the constructors, but wasn't to be in the end. 5th place overall in our rankings, Ruby, is Carlos Sainz. Now, one of our pundits have actually given him top spot. That was Carl, and I remember. And he did have a good year. He did have a good year. That was Tom laughing there, in case you couldn't tell. He did have a good year. Slow start to the year. He was unlucky at times, but overall, really performed well in that McLaren, and almost, like we talked about earlier in Italy, almost won his first race.
Yeah, I mean, we've already mentioned a lot about how positive Carlos Sainz performed this season, and I think it's just a testament that he's going to go on maybe to a car that's not going to perform as well this season, but he will certainly still be driving the tits off that Ferrari. It's just it tells you a lot about Carlos Sainz that he's just never really happy to be not doing well. You know, we saw it in his Toro Rosso days, the rivalry between him and Max Verstappen, and then Verstappen obviously being promoted with Carlos Sainz kind of like not really having anywhere to go, so just left the Red Bull program. And since he left that Red Bull program, he's just been on a effectively vertical trajectory. But yeah, you know, he was fighting for the win in Monza. He took the opportunity to at least lead, I think it was in Portugal, you know, with the very damp start, you know, and showing some very solid overtakes in Bahrain. Like, Carlos Sainz is the driver that you want. It's just whether he wants to have your car or not.
Yeah, he's really, you know, took the torch from Fernando Alonso after he left McLaren. You know, he's really just outdriving that car. And for me, he's like Alonso, but without the politics, without the bullshit. You know, that's the difference. He really does rally people around him. I mean, Tom, I don't know what your take on it is, but I think, you know, he did start the season quite slowly. You know, he did all right overall. He was unlucky at times, but I think he really did carry that McLaren car, because at certain points during the season, it was only fifth best on the grid, but he still managed to get solid points finishes.
Yeah, if Carlos listening, I'd like to remind him that at the halfway point in the season, our half-term report, he gave Carlos Sainz a C and 7th overall. So how he can put him as driver of the season, I'm not quite sure. But there we go. That's for him to decide. Yeah, I completely agree. He had a lot of bad luck at the start of the season. He was absolutely plagued with it. Apart from his one mistake was it Russia where he drove into the wall? You can tell I don't remember Russia that well, because the second time I've mentioned it, I couldn't remember if it was actually Russia or not. But yeah, he looked to have the measure of his teammate, but just the bad luck constantly put him behind. And he, as already alluded to, he was robbed of a win. Probably deserved P4 in the championship, and was more consistent than Checo in a slower car, I believe. So yeah, I was a little, when he originally signed for McLaren, I was like, oh, okay, so we got a hot-headed Spaniard tied with a young Brit. This has never ended well for McLaren in the past, but that never came to fruition. And you know, they've been an absolutely brilliant team. I just really hope that Ferrari don't treat him as the second driver that I do think they've signed him to be behind Leclerc. If they give them equal status and get behind Carlos, then they can make him a world champion. I do truly believe that, and I think it's going to be him and Leclerc is going to be a really, really interesting battle next year. And provided Ferrari play fair, it's going to be great for Formula One.
Well, we'll see. Ferrari's tactics are not exactly the most, I don't know the word for it, agreeable at times, let's put it like that. But we'll see what happens. I mean, at the end of the day, if Sainz goes into that Ferrari and beats Leclerc, then maybe they'll just let it happen. But who knows? We'll have to see. But there was definitely no doubt who was top dog at Ferrari this season, though, Louis. We went for Charles Leclerc for fourth in our standings overall, and just again another driver who just drove the wheels off that car. That Ferrari at times was probably 7th, 8th fastest on the grid around certain tracks in certain conditions, but he managed to keep Ferrari in the fight for third place in the constructors until nearly the end of the season. You know, it was possible. And I think 8th place in the end for him in the standings. You know, it doesn't really do him justice, but yeah, I mean, the 2nd place in Austria, the 3rd place at Silverstone, you know, that car should not have been on the podium this year.
Yeah, it's weird to think that the 2 Leclerc podiums that we had this season came at the time where the Ferrari was absolutely terrible. Like, at the start of the season when it was really, really bad, it got its 2 podiums. At tracks that you need a lot of power, it just boggles the mind sometimes. But yeah, it was a tricky season for sort of Ferrari in general, and Leclerc did a very good job of sort of just trying to keep as much momentum going from, you know, weekend to weekend. Vettel was absolutely down and out from pretty much the beginning of the season, and Leclerc had to be the one to pick up the scraps and try and make something with it. And he did. He did a remarkable job. Sort of midway through the season, he dipped off a bit, but then we suddenly saw a kind of resurgence in the pace of the Ferrari. I remember Portimao was a very strong race for Leclerc, really taking the fight to the midfield teams. And the fact that he just missed out on a podium in Turkey was devastating, but at the same time, it allowed Vettel to get it. So I'm not going to complain too much, but if we get a more competitive car from Ferrari next season, I think we'll see a return to what we saw in 2019 with Leclerc fighting at the top, fighting for wins, consistently on the podium. He is a world champion in the making, and it's only a matter of time before Ferrari actually, buck up their ideas and give him a good car to challenge it.
Yeah, absolutely. I echo all of that. And I think at times this year, Ruby, he really did remind me of Michael Schumacher or Gilles Villeneuve in that Ferrari. It was not the best car. It was nowhere near being the best car on the grid, but he still just drove the wheels off the thing. And the passion that he has, I mean, like Louis mentioned about him just missing out on the podium in Turkey, and him beating himself so much on the radio, which I think he's so harsh on himself. He really didn't deserve it. I think he drove from 13th, something like 16th to 4th. That is an incredible drive. To only just miss out on second place, really. That's an incredible performance by him. But he's beating himself up. Just the win is just all that matters for him. And yeah, I think he's a real world champion in the making. And this season, it will have taught him a lot.
Exactly. We saw him beating himself up at Sauber when he was there. We saw him beating himself up in 2019, Azerbaijan, for example. He knew he was onto a good result that weekend, and then he put it in the wall. Like at Turkey, he knew that podium was his. Arguably, second place was his, and he lost it in the final 3 or 4 corners. But he says that's how he eggs himself on. That's how he then springs back the next weekend and has an even better result. Sadly, the Ferrari car didn't quite agree, but, Charles is a world champion in the weighing. He just needs the car to perform it and the consistency of that car, and then also to have a team that knows how to make strategies work, because the last couple of years at Ferrari, they should have done so much better, and, we could go on and on about that, but, they've very much let Charles down over the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. He's a real talent, and again, another guy that's so young. I think he's only 23, something like that. So, real champion in the making is Charles Leclerc. It's going to be very interesting to see how he does alongside Carlos Sainz next year, and if Ferrari give him a better car. But so moving on, and a guy that I'm very surprised at how low you've put him in the standings, Tom. I must be honest, but I'm sure you've got your reasons. Sergio Perez, he's 3rd overall in our standings, but you put him down in 10th below the super sub Nico Hülkenberg. I just want to hear your reasons for that.
Well, basically, it's a top 10 for the season, and for the season, when you're starting with the second best car and you get 6th, and 7th, and then 2 non-starts, obviously, granted because you got COVID, and then again a 5th place, a 10th place, a 10th place, and a 5th place for the first half of the season, that in what was the 2nd or the 3rd best car, that for me doesn't show that you should be that high up the top 10. His first half of the season is ironically what has actually given him a chance to be potentially world champion, because if he had done the same in the second half of the season as he did the first half of the season, I can't see any way that Racing Point would have opted for Vettel over him, and then he would be staying in that car next season. Whereas now, obviously because of that, he's getting a call up to Red Bull. So, I'm sure he wouldn't change anything looking back on it now. But based on that first half of the season, I couldn't see, he was probably in my kind of bottom 5 drivers in the first half of the season, and you can't be the top driver of the season or in the top 5 if you have that bad a first half of the season. Yes, his second half of the season was phenomenal, and for that's why he got into the top 10 for me. But perhaps a little bit harsh. But you look at Hülkenberg and you think, what more could Hülkenberg have done in that car? I think if Hülkenberg had been in later on in the season, if those performances had come in the last sort of 2 or 3 races, then perhaps he would have got the nod ahead of Perez for that drive in Red Bull this year. That's why my reasoning was there. But I say probably a little bit harsh and maybe slightly rose-tinted glasses as well. But I just couldn't see the drivers ahead. I put ahead of him had much more consistent seasons in my view.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I kind of get where you're coming from with that. He's done really well overall for me. If you take the whole season, yeah, he's perhaps not been as consistent, but he's absolutely plastered Lance Stroll. 50, well, I say that 50 points difference is big.
He didn't at the first half of the season. Stroll's ahead of him, even going into Silverstone when he was out for a couple of races. Stroll was ahead of him and performing better, and then when he returned, he only got a couple of 10th places. So that's for me. Stroll was the better guy the first half of the season.
Yeah, You could also argue though that he was still suffering the effects of COVID when he was getting them 10th places. But yeah, but for me, he was one of the drivers of the season. Just the win in Sakir does kind of flatter him a little bit, but to almost see him out of F1 would have been a travesty. I really do think that, but I guess we could have to agree or disagree slightly on that one. But Louis, how do you rate Perez's season? I mean, he got the win in Sakir. He got his first podium of the year in Turkey as well, and now he's got a Red Bull driving. I'm very excited to see how he's going to do next year against Max Verstappen.
Well, I put him as my top driver this season. I think I was one of two people who didn't put Lewis Hamilton top of the.
Spoilers! They're not going to see it coming.
No, I put Perez as top driver of the season. Like, he did have a bit of a shaky start, but I think we've seen the best Perez that we've seen probably in Formula One for a very long time. And Racing Point, I think in general, Racing Point have been probably a little bit disappointing. I think it's not just been Perez who was a little bit shaky at the start. Throughout this season, Lance hasn't. Over the course of the season, Lance has been pretty subpar. He did, get that podium in Monza. However, I would argue that it was his race to lose, considering he had just pitted for. Well, he changed onto completely fresh new tyres and jumped up God knows how many places to be where he was. Perez just, I think, when the contract rumours sort of started and we all realised that he was probably going to be out of a seat, he really did put his, foot to the floor and really show what he's capable of. And what he's capable of is being one of the best, most consistent, best tyre management, just best sort of racecraft, out of the drivers on the grid. He is an incredibly talented driver and completely deserving of that Red Bull seat. I think if he didn't get that Red Bull seat, it would have been absolute travesty for Formula One to not have Sergio Perez in it when he's quite clearly capable of doing so much better than what he has been sort of previous in his career. He was good. He was great at Sauber. Yeah, okay, McLaren was a bit, it wasn't great. But his time at, Force India Racing Point is really good. He's got consistent, he's got podiums here and there. And then to step up on the podium twice a season, not only the second place in Turkey, but then to get the win in Sakir, I think that's absolutely brilliant. Considering where he was in Sakir as well, he was facing the opposite direction in turn 3, and he goes and wins that race. I think it's truly amazing.
Yeah, like I always say, nobody saves a set of tyres better than Sergio Perez, and he really showed that in Sakir. And I'm so glad he's on the grid next year. I really am. He really does deserve it, in my opinion. But yeah, so he was third overall in our standings, fourth overall in the drivers' standings as well. Just one best of the rest. It was real tragedy as well to see him retire in the last race in Abu Dhabi. It would have been nice to see how he would have battled with McLaren's, but there we go. Sometimes you get unlucky, unfortunately. But he's got a seat for next year, so he's fortunate in that regard. Tom is not devastated about that at all, I could tell. I remember on the group chat, I remember you were like, yes, Perez is out. We've got this.
That was the moment of my race. That was the only good thing that came out of that race, really.
Oh, God, I'm so glad I missed that race. It just sounded awful. Good old Yas Marina circuit delivering yet again. Anyway, second overall in our standings, Ruby, was Max Verstappen. And almost second in the driver's standings as well. He had another great season. Red Bull didn't quite deliver the car that he needed to challenge the Mercedes. Mercedes was just something else this year. But, he absolutely stormed his way quite regularly to being right up there at the top, at least third place. I mean, I think he's the only guy other than Hamilton and Bottas to win more than one race in 2020 as well. I mean, just a brilliant season again by him.
Yeah, I mean, he could have also done with not storming his mouth every now and then, showing the Verstappen arrogance that, is very much polarized people towards him. But yeah, the only driver really to consistently fight the Mercedes when given the opportunity. Granted, you could argue that tended to come when Mercedes were at a disadvantage, like in the second Silverstone race. There was obviously the Mercedes couldn't operate to the standard that the Mercedes W11 should be able to because of the temperatures, and then Mercedes excuse of just not having the car in Silverstone when, really it was possibly just Hamilton came back from COVID too early and they'd stopped developing the car halfway through the season. But, as you said, Max Verstappen really did put on a show this season. Arguably could have had more wins. Lewis Hamilton was driving around on 3 wheels at one point, but if you're going to pit to get fastest lap, you've also got to be prepared that the car ahead, you're about to miss out on opportunity should something happen to them. And also probably should have finished second in the championship if, as you mentioned, Red Bull provided that car from the start of the season. And also maybe Verstappen had a few less collisions. And, the one in Sakir, in my opinion, was mostly his own fault by, going off the track and putting himself in a position as to where he was going to just hit a wall. So, yeah, deserved second place in the standings, but also possibly deserved second place in the championship this season.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. He could have definitely got more points. He was unlucky in Silverstone for that. I mean, you could say, if he didn't pit, he would have won the race, but you just don't know. He could have got a puncture as well. You never know what could have happened there. But yeah, not perfect by any means, but that's Max Verstappen. He's just incredibly aggressive, and sometimes he does take it too far. But again, there's another guy. He's still really young. He's 23 years old. He's got maybe 15 years left in F1 comfortably. So his time will come, without a doubt. But he won't have it easy next year with Sergio Perez. I do think he'll beat him overall. It is Verstappen is, Red Bull is Verstappen's team, but we'll see how he gets on there. Yeah, Tom, how do you rate Verstappen this year? I'm not sure where you put him actually in your. You put him pretty high. You put him third, yeah.
Did I put him third? Who did I put second then?
Leclerc.
Did I really? Oh, okay.
Too late to change it now. Yeah. The votes are in.
Yeah, no, it's fine. That's fine. I was. You've pretty much covered everything I was going to say there, Ruby, on Verstappen. But yeah, he started with the third best car, and he did wrestle it ahead of the racing points. I think, partially that was down to racing points. Lack of experience being up front and always having to do strategies to kind of roll the dice, whereas they should have just done strategies to continue their pace. That's what kind of lost them those positions as well. But Verstappen definitely outperformed the racing points at the first part of the season when the Red Bull potentially wasn't at its best. For me, he was neck and neck with Hamilton for pretty much the whole season. But whereas Hamilton's worst race of the season was his first race, where in my opinion he still deserved to finish in third place because that was not his fault when he crashed with Alex Albon. Then Turkey was Verstappen's low point of the season, and that ultimately was the reason why he wasn't my number one, because that was a very immature performance from him. He let his emotions get the better of him. Pole was his in qualifying and he blew it, and then trying too hard in the race he blew it again. So bad race in Turkey, but after, in the 17 race season, to have one bad race, and then when you look at the fact he had 5 retirements, and I believe Bottas just had the one, which that shocked me when I saw that, because I thought Bottas had a lot more retirements than that. I know he had issues in races which put him back, but to have 5 results completely wiped out like Verstappen has, and then to finish so close to Bottas in the standings and still have a chance of second going into the last race, shows why he was up there, level with Hamilton for most of the season. And a great performance. I mean, Hamilton was the standout. You only have to look at the point standings to see that. But I know, spoiler alert for anyone who doesn't know if he's going to come first or not. But yeah, he's. A great season. Still some rough edges to shine off before he reaches Hamilton's level. But as you say, he is a lot younger than Hamilton. He's got at least 10, 12 years on him. So yeah, provided he gets into the right machinery at the right time, he will be a multiple world champion without a doubt.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Tom. I mean, that's the thing. When Verstappen did finish, he finished on the podium every single time he finished a race, apart from Turkey. That was the only one. Every other time he finished at least third, and when he had at best the second car on the grid, that's all you can really ask of the kid. So, yeah, his time will come, like you said. It gets a very worthy second place on our list. He only 9 points in it at the end. 9 points between him and Bottas in the standings, in the drivers' standings this year. That shows you how close it was. And yeah, 4 retirements to Bottas as 1, and I think most of those retirements were mechanical as well. 5 retirements for Verstappen. He crashed in Sakir, but he had mechanical issues in Austria, mechanical issues in Italy, Tuscany, mechanical issues, and Imola. Did he have a tyre blowout and spin? Something like that?
Yeah, he went over a curb and got a puncture.
which kind of not really his fault. I mean, that's just unlucky. Everybody
Well,
goes
they
over
think,
the curbs.
yeah, it was more debris they thought, so I think it was completely out of his hands.
So yeah, there you go. So yeah, one bad race out of 17, not so bad at all. Yeah, very worthy second place in our standings. And now, no surprise at all, who is number one on our list? Myself, Ruby, Tom, Sam, Mikhail, Jack, Reese, Owain, Alex, Phil. All of us went for him for the top of it. 11 wins out of 16 that he competed in this year. All-times win record. He matched Michael Schumacher's championship record. I think he broke the podium record this season as well. So, Louis, why did you put him second? It's Lewis Hamilton.
I mean, yeah.
Sorry, I put you on the spot a bit there, aren't I?
Just a little. It was close. It was close. I only put him behind Perez just because I think Perez, as I've already mentioned, I think Perez was kind of like a standout. You know, Perez wasn't in the W11 this season. You know, that car was absolutely near enough unbeatable at times that it was an absolute master of engineering, that car. And it completely blew away thoughts that we had of a title battle because it was just an amazing car. And then, of course, you can say, oh, it's just a car, but he did convincingly beat Bottas all season. But yeah, I'm really trying to dig myself out of a big hole here.
Good luck.
No, I still stand by it. But there's, of course, there's no denying, you know, the amazing achievements that Lewis has done this season. You know, to beat Schumacher's win record, to now equal his amount of titles. And I don't think there's anyone here that's going to disagree with me that he's probably going to beat Schumacher's title records as well. It's just inevitable, and especially with the very few changes teams are allowed to make to their cars next season. There's no reason that W11 again will probably win. So yeah, it was a great season by Hamilton, but just a bit better from Perez.
In Louis' opinion.
You are right, Louis. Perez wasn't in the W11. He was in the W10.
Yeah.
Branded as the RP20 or whatever it was called. The pink Mercedes. But we won't see the pink Mercedes next year. We won't even see a pink car on the grid next year. It looks like it's going to be all green for Aston Martin. But yeah, I mean, the thing is for me, Ruby, is that with Schumacher's records, I don't know, 5 years ago, even with when Hamilton was starting to win multiple titles, I still thought Schumacher's records, they're going to be intact. He's never going to win over 90 races. He's never going to win 7 world championships. It just seemed unattainable. But he's beaten them already, and he's still, who knows? I mean, obviously there's drama about his contracts and this and that, but he is going to be Mercedes next year. We all know that. Everybody knows that. But you know, he's potentially still got maybe even 5 years left in him. You know, this streak of him winning championships and so many races, it's not over by any means.
Yeah, you are right. You know, at the start of the 2014 season, Lewis Hamilton was a one-time world champion. You know, the turbo hybrid era has been the Hamilton era. And, you know, the consistency that he's shown, the performances that he's put in, you know, when he needed to, he put the pedal to the metal, to use that phrase. You know, I remember him being asked to finish at least 30 seconds ahead of the next person in Monza in 2014 or 15, I think it was, maybe even 2016. But, you know, he did that because, you know, he just had pace in hand. You know, and this season he won the DHL Fastest Lap Award for the 5th time. And all of those have only come since 2014. You know, Lewis Hamilton in a Mercedes is a winning combination. And it's going to be a winning combination for as long as they choose to be a partner together. You know, he'll always pull that out of the bag. And at the end of this season, he was obviously knighted. Now, whatever you think of the honour system or Lewis Hamilton, you can't deny that A, people have been knighted for less than he's done. And B, you know, he very much deserved it.
Yeah, Sir Lewis Hamilton, how can I forget? He's going to be knighted in the New Year's honours, and yeah, fully deserves it. I mean, 7-time Formula One world champion and counting. I mean, like you said, the turbo hybrid era has been so good to him. He's won at least 10 races every year since 2014. I think the only one where he didn't win 10, he won 9. It was just 1 year. So just the amount of winning that he's been doing. And yes, the car is the best on the grid. The car is the best on the grid by far. But he is beating Bottas all ends up. And Bottas is not a slow driver. People have a go at Bottas. I think he's had a poor season this year, but he's not slow. I think he's a good driver, to be honest. But just the consistency that he had. And some of the races that he won as well, Tom. I mean, he was nowhere in Turkey. Like halfway through the race, he was nowhere. And he won it by like 30 seconds or whatever it was. Some of the performances he's put in, he's really had to fight for it. And he's just shown that he's a class above.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole best car debate really annoys me, because you show me a world champion who has won the title in a car that isn't the best or equal to the best. I think the difference you can go with here is no one denies that Sebastian Vettel is a fantastic driver when he's not on like full summer holiday mode like he was this year. And you put Hamilton in the Ferrari of 2017, 2018 and 2019, and I think he wins at least 2 world championships in that car. The difference is that's the difference for me. It's, you've got all of the cars on the grid are separated by less than 7% because of the, I'm not sure if the rule's actually in place anymore about the 107% qualifying time, but if the cars were consistently outside the 107% time, then they would bring that rule back because it's there to stop cars being too slow. So all of the cars are within 7% of each other, and the driver makes about a 5% difference. That's for me. That's all it is. From the top to the bottom, about 5% difference, and that's why you put the best driver in the best car, they win. Best driver in the slowest car, they don't win. But Hamilton and every car he's ever been in has been a winning combination. I think that's the difference. You talk about Fernando Alonso being, one of the greatest ever, absolutely. But you put him, he's had seasons when he's been in a car that could just about win a race, and he hasn't won a race. That's the difference for me between Hamilton and Alonso. We're only talking about this season, but this season he has definitely been the best. Partially, I think that's down to the fact that there is slightly less talent this season than there has been in previous seasons. But absolutely, this season the best, certainly the best of this generation.
Yeah, without a doubt, one of the best of all time. Some people think the best of all time. We can debate about that another time, I'm sure. But yeah, he's just the best. As simple as that. He's the best. Him and that Mercedes right now is just the best combination, and nobody can come close to it. And obviously they started developing their 2021 car early as well because they could. So next year we're probably going to see a similar amount of wins and podiums and all that for Hamilton. It's just something else. Sir Lewis Hamilton, fully deserved, and very deserving of being top of our list as well. Nothing much more to say about the guy. We've waxed lyrical about him all the time. I mean, even after Austria, even after the first race of the year, where he wasn't performing the best, where he got 4th in the end, where he finished well behind his teammate Bottas. You still thought, right, well, it's still a long season. Then Hamilton's consistency just kicked in. I mean, 11 wins out of 16 that he competed in. And I think, to be honest with you, Abu Dhabi wasn't really fair. He wasn't 100% fit for that. So 15 where he was fully fit and fully there, something else. So that is our top 10. I'll quickly run down it again. 10th place, we opted for Valtteri Bottas. 9th, George Russell. 8th, Pierre Gasly. 7th, Lando Norris. 6th, Daniel Ricciardo. 5th, Carlos Sainz. 4th, Charles Leclerc. 3rd, Sergio Perez. 2nd, Max Verstappen. 1st place, of course, Sir Lewis Hamilton. Just missing out, but only by 3 points. Nico Hülkenberg, he's the honourable mention for this. He just missed out on our top 10. And the guy's also getting a vote. Lance Stroll got 3 points. Esteban Ocon got 2. And Kimi Räikkönen got 2 as well. And I was the only guy who voted for Kimi Räikkönen, I'll be honest. I generally, I mean, you guys, we can talk about this if you want, but I generally thought he did all right this year at times. But the car really didn't help him either. So maybe I'm just a bit biased. Who knows? But
he outperformed his car, but he's also very much outperformed his welcome on the grid, in my opinion.
I don't know. I generally thought that Giovinazzi were going to outperform him this year. He's not really. But then again, Giovinazzi's not been that good either. So,
And Giovinazzi has been on the par with Raikkonen for most of the season, in my opinion, as well. Is to outperform Giovinazzi when you've got that much experience. And when he was in a race-winning car in the Ferrari, it took him 4 years to win a race.
Well, I mean, that wasn't entirely due to his lack of pace, though. He was dealt a bad hand sometimes in that Ferrari.
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, if he was the number one driver, he probably would have won 3 or 4 races, in my opinion, in that car, and that's with the full weight of Ferrari behind him. So I've never really. I think, yeah, he deserved to win the World Championship in the way he came back in 2007, but he's not really been peak Kimi since he signed for Ferrari, really, in my opinion. And yeah, as you say, outperformed is welcome.
Fair enough. That's what I always say. I know nothing about Formula One. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just the host. Well, we hope you enjoyed that rundown of our top 10. If you disagree with that top 10, by all means, tweet us at F1 Chronicle on Twitter and follow our Facebook page as well, F1 Chronicle. We do go out live. We have been going out live in this one as well. So yeah, follow us on there, like us on that. Yeah, and we'll be back in 2 weeks' time I think we'll probably go and vote for our top 10 drives of the season, as in performances in races, like Lewis Hamilton in Silverstone, or Lewis Hamilton in Hungary, or Lewis Hamilton in the Eiffel Grand Prix, or Lewis Hamilton in Turkey, or Lewis Hamilton in a lot of the races this year. I think he'll make a few appearances.
You mean Perez and Sainz won't get in there? They were the best drivers, weren't they?
Well, you and Carl need to form a McLaren voting block. I mean, Carl did his bit. He went with Sainz for the top, and Lando Norris seconded his, so he did his part.
Well done, Carl. Thanks for that.
But if you want to hear more from Tom and Carl, where can we find you guys?
We are at Monkeyseat Pod on the socials. www.monkeyseatpod.com is the website, and you can find us on all major podcasting platforms. Just search for The Monkey Seat. We're on YouTube as well, but if you search for Monkey Seat, you get a lot of aerodynamic videos, so actually search for podcast.
Fair enough. Always good for an interesting opinion, these two, as you can tell by their rankings in this. So. We are now available on Amazon Music, as well as YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Omni Studio, and Pocket Cast. Just search for the F1 Cred Talk on all of those. We've got a huge back catalogue of shows, over 80 episodes now, including more shows like this, like top 10 performances of the season, driver mid-season ratings, as well as the usual race qualifying and preview shows as well. We've got a subreddit, F1 Grid Talk. Just search for that on there to join the conversation. If you want better mics and lights for us all, we've got a Patreon as well. Just search for F1 Grid Talk on that. And yeah, like I said, we'll be back in 2 weeks' time to go through our top 10 drives of the season. Thank you very much for joining, everybody. I really do appreciate it.
No worries.
No worries.
Thanks for having us on.
Oh, always welcome. Yeah, and we'll see you for that one. Until then, bye-bye.